if you're watching for the first time, welcome. In today's video, I'm going to review a book written by Bryant Merchant called Blood in the Machine. This book is a history of the Luddite movement in England in the early 1800s as a group of artisan cloth weavers and other workers in the cloth industry fought against the set of entrepreneurs and business people who were automating these cloth workers out of a job. And this movement became known as the Luddite movement, and as I'm going to talk about, gave a meaning to the word Luddite that I think is somewhat confused. So let's get started with my 5 key takeaways. First of all, a lot of people, or most people, have the wrong idea about the Luddites. The Luddites were not necessarily technophobes. They did not necessarily just believe in no technology at all. The problem was they were protesting not the machinery, or not just the machinery, but how the machinery was being used to lower their wages, take them out of jobs, and definitely lower their working conditions. You have to understand that previous to the Industrial Revolution and the factorization of cloth working, these artisans usually worked out of their homes. So they had a very good work life. They could work when they needed to and take care of their family and do other chores as they needed to. But as machines began to take over the production of cloth and other weaving activities, these working conditions were changed as if these workers wanted to work in the field, they had to move to factories, which is where the jobs were. And this led to long working hours, poor conditions, and in lots of cases, children working in the factories, which led to lower wages and even lowered the adult wages, since wages always tend to spiral downwards when they can. Another key idea I got from this book is that the entrepreneurs back then were very similar to entrepreneurs and big tech entrepreneurs today. They were trying to, the entrepreneurs of the 1800s were trying to disrupt cloth making in the same way that big tech companies try to disrupt different parts of our economy now. These entrepreneurs back then were focusing on maximizing profits while minimizing all costs possible, especially wages, as that was probably the major cost factor in these factories. These cloth-making entrepreneurs were also willing to lower product quality just to maximize profits, and we see that now in the enshittification of social media, as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram all get worse and worse for the user as the owners of these media companies work harder to make more money for their shareholders. And finally, just like especially in AI and Apple's phone and watch production, these entrepreneurs were encouraging child labor since children could work for lower wages and were less likely to strike and protest about the working conditions that they were forced to work under. A third takeaway from this book is that, just like today, the government actively supported these entrepreneurs. As always, the English government sided with money, and with money there was power for the usual selfish reasons. These cloth entrepreneurs would promise to elect them if they would enact laws that favored the business over the workers. As the Luddite movement grew larger, the entrepreneurs even convinced the government to call out troops to protect the property. As you read in the book, what the Luddites did to protest was smash the machinery that was found in the factories. The entrepreneurs couldn't control this without some sort of force, so they convinced the government to bring in troops. And then finally, as the machinery smashing got larger and larger and more common, the entrepreneurs convinced Parliament to enact laws that not only outlawed the destruction of machinery, which was actually already outlawed, but they also made it a capital crime to do so. It's interesting in the book that there were several writers who were inspired by the Luddites. One of them was the poet, or the Romantic poet, Lord Byron, who not only wrote several political poems based on his knowledge of the Luddite movement, but he was also a member of the House of Lords of Parliament and stood up and made several speeches in support of the Luddites. Another writer who was influenced by the Luddites was the poet and radical thinker Percy Bysshe, I believe, Shelley. He was a radical, but some of his radical ideas came about from the plight of the Luddites. And then finally, one of the more well-known of the writers of this time, Mary Shelley, who wrote the novel Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, wrote that book as a clear warning about technology, and partly that was based on her experience with the Luddite movement. My last takeaway is, when will uprisings against big tech happen? And does that portend something for our future? So when big tech uses technology to replace skilled work, get away from regulation, or downgrade traditional jobs, you will see perhaps uprisings against that big tech. Eventually, the general public will believe that big tech owners become overly greedy, as happened in England over time. A large influence on that was Charles Dickens. Then you'll begin to see maybe some new modern Luddite movements. And then when big tech owners can use tech to block past upward mobility, which they are doing now, don't be surprised to see an uprising in some sort of Ludditism or Luddism. And then finally, when tech development becomes anti-democratic, which we're seeing hints of in the way big tech leaders are working now with the current U.S. government, those kinds of conditions will lead to could lead to a Luddite movement. So to conclude, one of the things we're seeing today is that tech workers are in danger of being replaced by AI, and they need to become vocal in the defense of their jobs. Second, our government needs to stop being so enamored of big tech and become more cognizant of the damage big tech and AI can cause to employment. And then finally, the public, especially, need to take the claims of big tech with some skepticism. We don't need to necessarily believe that AI is going to come and take all of our jobs today, as a lot of AI leaders would have us believe. And we need to look at these things critically and understand that we have the power to keep some of these things from happening. So thanks a lot for listening and viewing this video. Thanks to SlidesGo for providing the template for my slide presentation. If you're enjoying the content of these videos, please like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next video.